Hi, my name's Leonard Andy and I'm a Djiru traditional owner of the Mission Beach area. Today, as you can see, it's raining and I'm going to talk about some of the ecological values in the rainforest. And I thought, well, seeing that it's rainforest, it's appropriate that it's raining. The Djiru people, everything came from the forest. Your food, your medicine, everything, your house, your weapons, and for the food, our people didn't eat a lot of red meat. They ate a lot of different kind of meat and a lot of vegetables. A lot of the staples are plants from the rainforest, especially with the nuts. There's about maybe 5 different nuts that are used in the rainforest to make flour. That includes cycads, black bean, yellow walnut that grow probably everywhere in Djiru country. And the nuts were really a staple. And they say that Aboriginals didn't have gardens, but when I went looking with other people for grinding stones, we were told by some of the elders, go look for the trees first, because the grinding stones were never carried around. And that's how we found them, at the base of nut trees. But the people didn't carry the grinding stones around, they left them at the base of the nut trees. Miran, the black bean, that was a real staple. The leaching process took time. Once it's been treated and the toxins taken out of it, it can be wrapped in a package with green leaf, usually bajal, ginger leaf, and with gabara, the candle nut tree, the really big leaves. And that package could be buried in the ground for 9 to 12 months. And when they'd come back to certain areas, they'd dig it up again, because that's the food you eat while you're collecting and processing the nuts, because that could take 3 to 4 days. And what I'm talking about is all women's business, because the men didn't do it. But you learn everything because you've all got mothers, and you learn a lot of the women's stuff from your mother. Also, young men, before they got a wife, they have to be able to live and look after themselves. So they learn how to do things. A midger is a traditional rainforest shelter. All my teachers were men, and they all told me they learned from women, from their aunties and their mother. Men and women build it together, but the woman is the boss when it comes to building the midger. She'll pick the spot and deciding on what sort of midger you build. It'll be the woman's decision. The men help. What I'm holding here and what's behind me today is called a creeping pandanus, but the Aboriginals, we call it yagal. It has a round orange fruit and it's a spiky ball about maybe that big. It's a delicacy. A lot of the cassowaries will come and get it, and the fruit can be growing at different heights. The cassowary will peck and break it, because underneath the orange spikes is a gel with all seeds. And it's sweet. Normally you can see where the cassowary's been and started eating it, but he's opened it up for birds. Also goanna eat it. A lot of people think goannas just eat meat, but in the rainforest they eat a lot of fruit too. Also, eel eats it because it grows on the banks of the creeks, and when it falls in the water they eat it too. One of the other uses for it is for when you're using fish poison in the streams and you want to slow the current down, not dam the creek. You'll cut off the top here and it's stuck upside down on a piece of lawyer cane. But you might put 20 of them beside each other. And that's just to stop the current. So the fish poison you use will only work in that little area. You'll put it down below where you want to do it, and you'll put it up above. And once you release that little mobile dam, the poison don't work. It travels with the current. This vine here, today it's called a candle leaf vine because the leaves look like candles. In language it's called goyu. When it has a flower, one of these leaves will turn pink and go red. And then it'll fall out and then it'll have a little seed pod and there'll be maybe 7 or 8 seeds. And they're round, they're red, bright red in colour. I was taught traditionally that when you eat that fruit, you don't eat it straight out. You put it on a green leaf and you put it not in the fire but beside the fire where the coals are on the edge, and you eat the fruit hot, not hot but warm. And it's like that's how I was taught how you eat it, not to eat it raw. It's a favourite with cassowaries, a lot of the birds. What I'm looking at here, it's called native ginger, but in our language it's called bajal. And these are the seed bulbs here on the bottom. For our people here in the rainforest, this plant was a food, and it's also used, the leaves, as a seasoning when you wrap it around fish, when you cook fish in the coals. But the bulbs at the bottom, they'll probably get maybe 4 times bigger than this. When you eat them, there's all little separate capsules inside, and it's full of little black balls. And it's a tangy ginger, like sweet but also tangy. Usually when they're ready to be picked, it'll push out a white pus from on top of the bulbs. Also, that's when you come and make your turkey traps around the base and traps for scrub hens. This is what they come to eat, the bulbs, when they're ripe. The inner fibre of these trunks can also be used to make rope. There's a lot of different rope trees in the forest, and they make different rope. You make rope for freshwater, and you make rope for saltwater. I usually use this when I'm tying an underlay for when I go over the top with tree sap and either bush rope or fishtail lawyer cane when I'm making spears or woomers. And the underlay has this and the sap of the milky pine. Because I learned to make spears from a lot of different teachers, and everybody has different little tricks of their own. But you have freshwater spears, saltwater spears, and different men you talk to all have their own different way when they're making spears. Around here some people would use little pieces of quartz as barbs, but you don't see that too much. It's either stingray barb or the quills out of the echidna. That's why this palm tree here is called gubangara in language, and it was one of the staples, part of the diet in the rainforest. After the Europeans come, they called it cabbage palm, because the inner heart, it'll start from about here. This is about nearly the size that you eat. They're usually, say, 2 metres to under 3 metres. When it gets above that, you don't eat it. And the leaves are pulled back, and there's a cylinder cabbage running up the centre. The Europeans learnt of some of the Aboriginals, and they were boiling it in water, and it goes like cabbage, their cabbage. That's why the common name around here is cabbage palm. The Aboriginals were eating it raw, or it can be roasted. It tastes a bit like coconut. What I'm holding here is called mudja, native bush guava. The fruit can be eaten. It has a bell-shaped fruit, and it turns yellow when it's ripe. It has a lot of seeds. But for men, this is an important tree because it's used to make spear shafts. Also for making fire. The smaller pieces are It's called mudja, but when it's used to make fire, it's called jiman, and it goes with a bagu, a traditional rainforest fire maker. And these are the sticks that are used to twirl to make the fire. This plant here, today it's called native nutmeg, but we call it garumba. Well, the fruit here, Torres Strait pigeons, wampu, emerald doves, a lot of the birds eat the fruit. It has red lacing around the seed inside, and it was used for medicine, but the peanut inside there can be roasted and eaten like a normal peanut. And the way I was taught to identify it was not to look up, was to look at the trunk and look at the skin. The animal that goes with this tree is garble, the green forest carpet snake. This tree and the snake have the same skin pattern. Larger ones have branches that run straight out from it. They're used for spear shafts as well as spear heads. And also the larger trees you make boomerang from the flange, and it doesn't have a big flange. You can also make wumra from it. Upper branches are used for spear heads as well as spear shafts. If you're going to make spear heads or spear shaft, you've got to climb this tree to get the straight ones straight out. And the sap from this tree, I can show you. I'll say sorry, because I'm going to put a little tiny cut. That's coming. You'll see the sap looks like blood. And this sap is used as medicine, as a dressing over any cuts on your body. And it's to stop infection. Traditionally, if someone put a spear in you and you end up with 2 holes, you plug it with white ochre, and then you give it a dressing of this over the top. Traditionally, you'll heat probably bajol, green ginger leaves, and that's stuck on there with spider web, and a bark bandage is put around your body and tied up with vine. If there's 2 holes from the spear, as your body recovers, it pushes the white ochre out. But this is used as a dressing to stop infection. You use it for any cuts, scratches on your body. These are the seeds and the seed pod of what they call today either false sandalwood or a red bean tree. Aboriginals call it gubban gubban. These seeds were used for decorations, for jewellery, worn by men. They'd put a hole in the seed and they're all joined together, and you'd make a circle at least a metre round, and then it's looped over your neck over and over till it ends up with a large bundle under your chin. And that decoration was worn when men were going to do ceremony, to fight. Today people use it to make jewellery. This is called a rose apple, but that's a common name because I know about 3 different trees that they've used that name for. The fruit has all fallen off because we've had too much rain. And our language name is Kombi. It's the name of one of my father's uncles. That's his language name. Also, it's a rope tree for making rope. The fruit on the larger ones grows on the trunks, but it also grows on the branches. Not many animals eat it, because when you see it in the forest, you'll find it all laying on the ground. But I do know that the musty kangaroo rat, he eats it, because I've seen him eating it. And so this pandanus here is called baima. It has a fruit that's probably as big as a coconut, but it's made up of all little segments. And when the fruit is on the ground, rotten, and it's got a sweet smell, that's usually a sign that saltwater turtle, budgie has already come and laid his eggs, and they're in the nest. And that's why it was used as a signal tree for that. People still eat the eggs, people still eat saltwater turtle, but today they have a lot of pressure on them. We have too many dogs in Mission Beach. The turtles won't come in. Also, we've had too many fires. People have been burning fires on driftwood on top of the dunes. And we all know that the turtles don't lay their eggs in the sand on the actual beach. They lay it up where the tide doesn't touch, usually up on the top of the dune. That's why it's a paperbark tree, but we've got many different types of paperbark. This one, you can use the flowers and the leaves and with the bark when you're cooking fish, and to stuff it, also to wrap it around the fish. And the fish isn't cooked in the flame, it's cooked either in the coals or it's cooked under hot sand. And the paperbark, it's also used as traditional covering on the outside of your midges, and it's usually wet weather covering. You have bladygrass, govangara leaf, that's the cabbage palm. They're mainly a covering on your midge on your house for summer. And fan palms and paperbark are for the wet season. Well, the tree that I'm touching here today is called a milky pine. In our language it's called bubadilla. It's a shield tree. It's also an important tree for fire making. This makes the base what they call the bagu, the actual flat base what the sticks sit in when you're making fire. Also it's medicine. That's why this sap, it's diluted with water and used as a mouthwash for ulcers, abscesses, but you have to be really careful with it because this sap is used as glue in spear making, and you don't want to get this in your eyes because if you get it in your eyes, right on your eyeball, the doctor will not be able to do too much for you. It will burn and blind you. Also, it's used when you stick cockatoo feathers in your hair and on your body for adornment. The old men said, oh, when they used to have it on them, you take off skin when you rip it off. And in some of the museums down south, they've got like caps made of cockatoo feathers that the men would be wearing when they dance and fight, and they've cut it off. And it's like a cap. But they were collected by the Europeans and taken down south to the museums. Well, this tree here is ure, that's another ure there, Davison plum. It's also a spear tree. Those upper branches that are bent and out of shape, they're really straight, but they just have bends in them. The bark is taken off, usually you leave it in the creek, maybe a day, let it soak, you take it out and then you run it through the fire and you straighten it by bending it. This is one of the main ropes you use. It's a fig, but I don't know what type, but in our language it's called bumbil. It makes a nice rope. Usually you use the smaller branches, they're cut off, and you leave it for a while and you scrape off the outer bark, and then it's stripped into little thin strips and it's rolled on your leg. Traditionally, not too many people do it. They make rope today, but I don't see anyone putting fire ash on their leg when they're rolling the rope. And that's what we used to see the old men doing. And it take the hair off your leg too. Women do it, but men make rope too. And it's a real soft rope. It's used in spears, but it's strong. Yeah, bumbil. It's also used for the rope that ties jaman, the fire stick, to the bagu on the back. This plant here, today it's called a lamandra. For our people it's called jindarigan. This is one of the materials to make mindis. It's a small basket that's usually carried around under your neck. Women make it, men make it, and the basket usually carries valuable items. For some people they would carry special things in it. With the mindi, what goes in the mindi is a moaga, the message stick, and the mailman carries it under his neck so everybody can see that basket with the message stick, so they know that he's not up to any good. It's like to identify who he is. And the mailman has his own special weapons. He has a short sword and he has small spears. But normally the messenger doesn't get hurt. He would carry the message stick to the edge of his boundary, usually make fire, or someone else will go ahead and tell the people that he's there. And he'll wait there for that tribe to come and meet him, or people from that tribe, and he'll hand over the Mindy and the message stick to them, and then they will take it to their next boundary. Most of the times that happened when you're leaving your language group and the message stick is travelling into another language group area. You might understand each other a little bit, but use separate languages.